श्रितजनावन समीरश्रीकाळहस्तीश 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 श्रितजनावन समीराकार मां पाहि राजमौळे देवी श्रीकाळहस्तीश श्रितजनावन समीराकार मां पाहि राजमौळे समीराकार मां पाहि राजमौळे समीराकार मां पाहि राजमौळे समीराकार मां पाहि राजमौळे हरि प्राणमय घोषा 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 लीलाकाश भूमि सलीलादि प्रकाश शिव हरि प्राणमय घोषा नीलाकाश भूमि सलीलादि प्रकाश शिव हरि प्राणमय घोषा नीलाकाश भूमि सलीलादि प्रकाश शिव श्रीकाळहस्तीश श्रितजनावन समीराकार मां पाहि राजमौळे प्रसूनाम्बिकापते ज्ञान प्रसूनाम्बिकापते
விண்ணாளும் தேவர்க்கும் மேலாய வேதியனை மண்ணாளும் மன்னவர்க்கும் மாண்பாகி நின்றானை தன்னார் தமிழடிக்கும் தன்பாண்டி நாட்டானை பெண்ணாளும் பாகனை பேணு பெருந்துறையில் கண்ணார் கடல் காட்டி நாயேனை ஆட்கொண்ட அண்ணாமலையானை பாடுதுங்கா நம்மா நாய். Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. A very good evening to one and all. We are in the 4th episode of the series on Panchabhuta Sthalams that we're doing, starting from Ekamareshwara Temple in Kanchipuram, Thiruvanekka Appulinga Kshetram. Then we visited Thiruvannamalai last week, Arunachaleswara Kshetram, and we are here in the penultimate week, the 4th element, which is represented by the Vayulingam installed in Sri Kalahasti, another equally ancient town, a revered shrine for the Shaivites, sanctified by the visits of the Nayanmar saints, referred to and sung about in the Thevaram hymns, has its origin starting from the Puranic period with several different episodes involving different celestial beings and devotees who are a part of the Purana fabric of this town, and how the hillock came to be addressed as the Kailasha of the South, and more on it, appreciating the art and architecture, the inscriptions, and the festivals. Let's start with a quick recap of what we did last week. Thiruvannamalai, one of the most grand temple complexes of Tamil Nadu, with 9 towering gopurams and 5 corridors, the Tejolinga Kshetram, where the hill as such, the Arunagiri, Arunachalam, as such is worshipped as Shiva. It has a circumference of 14 kilometers, and the circumambulation or Giri Pradakshinam as it is called is a popular tradition there. And the story of how Parameshwara appeared as the primordial column of fire, and how Vishnu and Brahma had to accept their defeat, accept his supremacy, and understood that devotion at the holy feet of Shiva is what is going to fetch you benefits. And Arunachaleshwara and Apita Kujamba, the divine couple of Thiruvannamalai Kshetram. With that recalling of what we did last week, let's get to know about Sri Kalahasti, the Kshetram where Shiva appears as the Vayu Lingam, installed by Vayu, and an embodiment or element representing wind. Worshipping the wind as one of the most important life-giving elements is there, and that's the breathing process is what it actually breathes in life. So wind is like as much as the reason why we are all living beings, and without that, what happens to life? So it's another tradition across the globe. Several ancient civilizations have the tradition of worshipping wind, and worshipping wind as a god in different names. And you have classical Greek and Rome traditions where wind towers exclusively were erected, and they were octagonal in shape, just in case to accommodate 8 different winds from 8 different directions. Each of the wind was called by a different name. And you have traditions like festivals where flying kite by itself is considered as an offering to the wind god, and more. Of course, one of the grand and the ancient Indian tradition identifies Vayu as a god, personification of wind, the divine personification of wind, and he is one amongst the 8 Digbalakas. He is offered the northwestern corner in the Digbalaka Mandala, and he is seen riding a deer, and he is forearmed holding a flag. That's a dvajam basically. That's his most important symbol that he holds. And then according to there are more classifications of and different ways of identifying the wind god, and each of it has a separate set of weapons that he carries, and more. Now we'll get ourselves introduced to the Kalahasti Kshetram, Sri Kalahasti as it is called in today's Tamil Nadu on the borders. And the temple is very, very special because it's again a temple on the foothills. It is right there, just abutting the hillock. And on the other end of the temple complex is where the Swarnamukhi river flows. Kalahastishvara temple, which represents wind. The name has, the very name of the city can be split into three parts: Shri, Kala, and Hasti. Each of it has got its own Puranic episode of how Shiva blessed these elements, and so that should be dealt with in detail. But before getting into that, there are two important stories that which we should know, and that starts from Brahma, the time when the Pralaya Kalam has happened and the next Yugam has just been created, and Shiva has just created Brahma, has breathed life into Brahma, and has handed him over the Vedas. So that's how the creation theory is with the Hindus here. So Shiva is the primordial god, and he instructs Brahma he blesses Brahma with the Vedas and instructs him to start the creation process on him being deputed by Shiva. So Brahma at the early stage, not sure about what to do and what was his role exactly, and just having the Vedas, which was voluminous, and didn't know what exactly is the essence of the Vedas or where to begin, when he was clueless about all this. And he prayed to Shiva. Parameshwara pointed to him a particular peak in the holy range of Kailasha Parvatam, called as the Shivanandaika Nilayam, asked Brahma to pick a rock from there, carry it with him, and go on a pilgrimage down south to identify a place where he can actually feel the weight of the rock that he was carrying. So Brahma started on this pilgrimage, started from Kailasha, plucked a small part of the peak called as Shivanandaika Nilayam, one of the peaks in Kailasha Parvatam ranges. He walked with it on his shoulders, and it felt very light. He could actually walk with it without feeling its weight. He walked down south till a point where he actually felt the weight of the rock that he was carrying. And as ordered by Shiva, he placed it there. Now that is how a part of Kailasham has come down to the south and is called as Dakshina Kailasam. So Brahma installed a Shivalingam there, just next to the place where he installed this rock. It was a Chaturmukha Lingam with 5 faces, and the 5th face of Shiva, which is the cap of the lingam as such. There is this shrine still existing in Kalahasti, the Chaturmukha Linkeshwara shrine, which has a very beautiful Chaturmukha Lingam from the Chola period, which we'll see soon. So that's how a part of the Kailasha Parvatam was brought down south, placed here by Brahma. So Kalahasti is put at par with the Kailasham because it's a part of Kailasham, in fact. And it is time immemorial, times when the universe wasn't even created. It was just Brahma there and the land masses were there. Bharatavarsham was there. So as ordered by Parameshwara, Brahma had to bring it down. These are from the Puranic episodes. And the next important story is about how Vayu was brought into this. So Vayu apparently reached Parameshwara and requested him to help him make people understand how important he is. The times when Vayu was not put in charge of, wind as such, as an element. So he was just another Devata. So he engaged in, he started meditating on Parameshwara, wanted a special post, so much so important that people would always remember him. So Parameshwara again identified Kalahasti as the best spot for him, told him that is where Brahma was in fact lectured upon about the essence of Veda. And the end of Brahma's penance, Parameshwara appeared and gifted him the Panchakshara Mantram, which is like the seed of the Vedas. It's that 5-lettered mantram from which the Vedas came out. So he handed him over the Panchakshara Mantram. Brahma, of course, chanted it several crore times to understand the essence of Vedas and went back to Satyalokam and started his creation process. So Parameshwara himself orated all these episodes to Vayu and suggested that it is the best place to go and meditate. So Vayu comes down, installs a Shivalingam made out of pure camphor, Pachakarpuram, in Tamil solluvom. So he made a Shivalingam out of camphor, a very pure form of camphor in fact, and worshipped it. And because it was made out of camphor, Abhishekam and other processes wasn't done initially. So Vayu meditated in front of the lingam that he has installed, chanted the Panchakshara Mantram, only to be blessed by Parameshwara. 3 important boons. Vayu requested Parameshwara that he should be present everywhere in the world. A place without Vayu's presence is no place at all. It cannot even be defined as space. Secondly, He wanted to be an integral part of every Jivatma. So the very point of breathing, which is like the most basic necessity for someone to live, is with wind. And so it should be pure wind, and so you don't choke without it. So that's how he becomes the integral part and the life-giving source for all jivas. The third was he requested that that Shivalingam that he installed be named as Karpura Lingam and worshipped as Vayu Lingam. So from then on, the Vayu Lingam, the lingam that he installed in the Kalahasti shrine, gets the name as Vayu Lingam, and it is identified as that specific lingam which was installed and worshipped by Vayu, the Devata who went on to become the life-giving factor to the whole world. So that's how the Vayu's connect is brought in, and hence the deity is called as Vayu Lingeshwarar. Now to the three-part story on the etymology of the place, Shri, Kala and Hasti. The first story with Shri, that part of the name starts from the banks of Tamrabarani river in the Pandya country, where a Brahmin scholar was born, and he was taught the Vedas. Apparently, as when he was in his teens, he took up interest in weaving. He was so much so interested in the craft that he gave up on Vedic practices, Vedic rituals. So he was, he pushed himself out of the community of the learned scholars, installed a loom for himself, started weaving. And he felt that was the most important occupation to practice. He fell in love with it, married a woman from the same community, and spent his life in weaving. And this, as he aged, it was a time when he couldn't actually sit in the loom and weave for himself. That is when yet another Brahmin approaches him, a devotee approaches him, requests him to weave a very, very special dhoti of silk, made out of silk, weave a dhoti of silk, out of silk. And because that is a very special dhoti, he placed an order to him, as it has got to be made as an offering to the Shivalingam that he was worshipping. He requested this weaver to weave a very, very special dhoti out of silk that could be offered to Parameshwara. When he was informed this, the weaver, who was bedridden, who was not energetic enough to actually sit in the loom and weave a dhoti, got up, managed to weave a dhoti with so much of love and devotion, because it's an offering to be made, and made a nice dhoti and gave it to the devotee who asked. And he, in fact, said, I'm not taking any money as remuneration for this. This is an offering from my side too. So this dhoti that was offered was good enough for this weaver to be blessed, to be born as a spider in the next birth of his. And this spider was born in the forest around Sri Kalahasti, made its journey to the Kalahasti Kshetram, got a glimpse of the Vayu Lingam, and as the memories from his previous birth kind of continued, started weaving very beautiful mandapas and vidanams, kind of a canopy, and vimanams and other things around the Vayu Lingam. Started weaving. The cobwebs were so artistically done that it could completely cover the Shivalingam as a dhoti around him. It went on to weave beautiful vidanams, like generally a vidanam is a very artistically stitched cloth made out of silk or cotton, which kind of shelters any murti that is installed. So the vidanams were made, and it started, as the Purana says, it went on to weave columns and more structures and mandapas. Technically, it started constructing the first shrine for Vayulingeshwara, and it spent its life in its service of Vayulinga in Kalahasti and attained moksham. The next is about Kala. Again, this is also about a rishi who was meditating on the Kailasha Parvata, on one region of the Kailasha Parvata. One fine morning, he saw all the celestials, the devatas, coming down, install a Shivalingam and worship it with gemstones, precious gemstones. And when approached and asked about what is so special about worshipping Shiva with precious stones, they told him that when someone manages to worship a Shivalingam with precious stones, he's helped out of the vicious circle of life and death right in that birth, and he attains moksha. So he was keen and asked them where exactly to collect all these precious stones. So they suggested that with all the tapas that you have done in this birth, request to be born as a a snake in your next birth, and also request that you're born in the Nagalokam, where the snakes, some very powerful snakes, make gemstones, and so you can collect all of them and worship Parameshwara. So the Indian traditional belief that the snakes, certain varieties of snake, spit these precious stones. So this particular rishi requested Parameshwara to be born in the Nagalokam as a snake can spit gemstones, collect all of it, and worship Kalahastishwara. So the snake is also born in the Bhatala Lokam in its next birth, as blessed by Parameshwara in Kalahasti, gets to see the Vayu Lingam that is installed there, and the spider that was worshipping, so got itself in worshipping the Parameshwara with such beautiful precious stones. So the snake was in the habit of collecting all the gemstones in the early hours, make a trip to the temple and offer it all to Parameshwara in the morning hours. Next is about the Hasti, the elephant. Now, this is also a story about a learned scholar born in the Chera Desa, the Malayala Desam of today's Kerala, and he was an ardent devotee of Parameshwara, so much so that he was blessed to be born as an elephant in his next birth at Kalahasti. And there in Kalahasti, the snake was already worshipping, so this elephant was also there. A very similar scene like what we saw in Thiruvanekka. So the elephant takes a dip in the holy river there, walks up to the temple with flowers, wild flowers and leaves, and offers it to Kalahastishwara. And the elephant notices such heavy, precious gemstones, lustrous ones in fact, on the Lingamurti, and not able to, with the fact that the stones would be extremely heavy and that would bother the Lingamurti. Every day the elephant cleaned the lingam of all the stones and offered its flowers. The next day morning, only to be seen by the snake, the next day morning, that all the offerings that it made, the gemstones, were all scattered around the lingam. So this practice goes on, and one fine day the snake understands and that it is the elephant that is creating this difference every day, that it is the elephant that is disturbing and removing all the offerings that it made. So the next day it waits for the elephant to come, gets into the elephant, bites it, poisons it, and the elephant dies. So both these creatures that were worshipping Parameshwara there, the elephant and the snake, both of them attain moksha and reach Kailasa. And so that is how the spider, elephant, and the snake come in here to worship Parameshwara. Now, this is a common element that you see in several Sthala about how Parameshwara is merciful enough to accept worship from animals and birds, reptiles, amphibians in some cases, and it just goes on. Ants have worshipped Parameshwara, parrots have worshipped. So there is absolutely no difference at all. Any living being, even without knowing that it is Parameshwara, if even by mistake it drops a flower on a lingam, it's accounted as a Shiva Punyam, and that's added to the Pava Punya account for that particular being. So that's how merciful Parameshwara is. So the story of how a spider named as Shri and a serpent, a snake named as Kala, and Hasti, the elephant, worshipped Kalahastishwara, and the name Shri Kalahasti comes from there. So till date, the Shivalingam that was installed by Vayu, the Vayulingeshwara Murti, which is solidified camphor, the reason why the Mula Lingam of Kalahasti is still not bathed in milk or honey, fruits and curd and other Abhisheka Dravyams that are generally used by and large in most of the Shiva temples. Here, in fact, a casing made out of gold is used to cover the Lingamurti. So this picture that you see now depicts the Lingamurti without the casing. And you can see that there is the spider that is also enshrined as a part of the Murti. There's a small oval shape there, which has the depiction of the spider. And you have the snake that has managed to crawl around the Lingamurti and with its hood that it holds there. And the two tusks of the elephant also is enshrined on the Murti. You see those two lines. That's the pair of tusks which represents the elephant. So all these three living beings managed to attain salvation, got itself immersed in the Lingamurti, and as a witness to that, till date, these symbols are there as a part of the Mula Lingam. So that's how the name Shri Kalahasti comes, and the connect between Vayu and the story of how Kalahasti first came into existence as a rock that was picked from Kailasha and brought down by Brahma. That's the aerial view. You can see that's the Dakshina Kailasam or Shivanandayika Nilayam, or it's referred to by several beautiful names, each representing a part of the Puranic episodes that are associated with the Kalahasti Kshetram. And the temple is in a very, very tricky position. In fact, a very classic case study for temple town planning, wherein you have the hillock on one side, and then you have the Swarnamukhi river, and the space that is sandwiched between these two natural formations is where the temple is existing. So that's the main temple campus that you see. As you can see, the temple is kind of abutting the hill. So there is no possibility of an expansion on the western side. So when Krishnadevaraya wanted to construct a nice tall Gopuram, he was left with no choice but to construct a Gopuram a little far away from the main temple campus. So that's the western Gopuram, which was recently rebuilt and conserved really well. And so this is the Gopuram that's a bit far away from the actual temple campus. That's from the other side. So that's Swarnamukhi River. The western Gopuram constructed by Krishnadevaraya, and the actual temple campus is just next to it. So we start with the standalone Gopuram, the Western Raja Gopuram. There are enough epigraphic records about when this was built. In fact, poems which speak, there is a Telugu inscription, which is a poetry, in fact, inscribed, which gives out the exact calendar date and the occasion and other things when Krishnadevaraya got this Gopuram consecrated. That's how the temple campus is. As you can see, that's a pithboard model. That's the hill there on top. And the temple campus is here. This is the south Gopuram, and that's the north Gopuram. The west Gopuram is what is there, a bit away from the temple main campus, and that's the east Gopuram. So we enter the hill on top. I mean, the hill in the background has the temple for Kannappa Nayanar, who is a very important part of the traditional records of Sri Kalahasti. That's the main entrance arch. You can see a very traditional, the color palette that is generally chosen by Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanams. So yeah, the temple has its own influence that way. The Eastern Rajagopuram, through which we generally, I mean, it's on the, this is the one that is facing the Swarnamukhi River. The other Gopurams, today, because of its location, southern direction kind of dominates. Most of the visitors to temple take the southern direction, and the access to the hill there, the hill temple, is also from the southern direction. So that's the most sought after Gopuram. Predominantly, you have the inner core part of the temple that was constructed by the Cholas that is still there. And later, this being very close to Tirumala and the Chandagiri kings and other donors, especially the third and the fourth phase of Vijayanagara kings, up until even the Aravida dynasty, they have contributed a lot in terms of jewelry, standardizing the festivals, and land donations. Architecturally speaking, probably the last and the most prominent construction was done by Krishnadevaraya, the West Gopuram that we just saw. And further after him, there were minor additions to the temple, like few mandapas inside, like the Unjal mandapams, the others that were built. The core is still from the Cholas. And there is also another interesting story that involves Agastya as a part of Sri Kalahasti. So once upon a time, there was a huge communion of all the devas that was happening in Indralokam, wherein rishis and all the devatas met there to debate on intellectual topics. So an argument, or rather a discussion about what is the best dharma to be practiced, who's the most powerful of all the devas, who's the most powerful of all the other gods. So all these discussions comes in. And when there was a question on the most powerful of all gods, Bhrigu Maharishi advocated Mahavishnu, Sriman Narayana, to be the most powerful of all gods. Agastya argued against it and said, if there is one God who is all powerful, and if there is that one God from whom all other gods were born out, and they are all being managed, it can be only Sri Parameshwara. And to prove that as a point, Agastya vowed to take up a very long penance, a very challenging penance, in fact, and said, let me see who is this God who is powerful enough to come and dissolve my penance, break it, and bless me. So Agastya chose Sri Kalahasti Kshetram came here and installed a small Shivalingam called as Agastya Lingam, and also worshipped Ganesha on the banks of Swarnamukhi river, built a small tank called as Jnana Prakashan Kodam or Jnana Prakasha tank, and started meditating upon Parameshwara by chanting the Panchakshari Mantram. While this was on, the second part of the story is about how Parvati, who was also on a pilgrimage, reached Dakshina Kailasa, which is Sri Kalahasti, fell in love with the place, about how quiet and naturally rich the place was, and wanted to perform a penance there. So requested Ganesha to stand guard, and she started meditating upon the Panchakshara Mantram. Gajamukasura, a demon who has the face of an elephant, wanted to disturb the penance of Parvati, came to Sri Kalahasti only to fight a war with Ganesha, and Ganapati, the all-powerful, managed to push him down to the Bhatala Lokam and went down there chasing him, slain him, killed him there and finished him, and came up to be worshipped by Agastya when he walked out of the Bhatala Lokam. And as a memory, I remember this, and this being the venue of where Ganesha killed Gajamukha in the Bhatalam, there is this very beautiful and unique Bhatala Ganapati's shrine that you see. Of course, there are other geographical reasons as to how this small shrine got trapped, below the ground level today. That's still there. Probably it was the old floor level, and as the temple grew and when the temple was raised for practical purposes, the shrine of Ganapati that gets trapped there is referred to as, goes on to be called as Bhatala Ganapati, and you have a very narrow and a crisp path through which you will probably have to crawl down in batches. They conduct it really well for safety purpose. You are sent in batches to walk down the steps there, very rustic steps that they have managed to carve out of the rock there. You'll have to go down, have a darshan of Ganapati and come out. So that's the Bhatala Linga shrine. And Agastishwara, when you plan your trip to Kalahasti, try and see if you can accommodate a visit to Agastishwara shrine. That's close to 1 kilometer from the main town. That's the Nandi in the outer Prakaram. As the tradition goes, majority of the Chola temples dedicated to Shiva, they have very purposefully made it inaccessible in the same direction that Shiva faces. You cannot enter a Shiva temple facing Shiva face to face. So you cannot face him and walk inside the temple. As a sign of humility and as a sign of submission, because that's how we walk in front of a king. You don't in fact walk in front of a king, right? You approach a king from the sides. So here again in any Shiva temple, especially those majorly constructed during the Chola period, and that which and those that have not been disturbed by the later dynasty, will still continue to have an entrance in the south direction. So you walk in through the side entrance to go in. So that's why there is a wall which kind of blocks your access. But just in case, to ensure the Nandi gets an undisturbed darshan of Parameshwara, there is a small stone jali that is made. And this picture shows the Nandi for the next prakaram, the subsequent prakarams as you walk in. And there is a shrine for Jnanambika as Bhala Jnanambika. And it is said that of the long pilgrimage of Adi Shankara, he has visited, of all the shrines that he has visited, he has also visited Sri Kalahasti and installed a Sri Chakram Peetam here. For the Shakta people, this is one of the Jnana Peetams. As I told you, in the later period, especially the later phase of Vijayanagara and the Nayaks who continued ruling, have added new mandapams and few modern or relatively modern mandapas to conduct exclusive festivals. You have concepts of Unjal Mandapam, where the deity is brought in and kept in a swing, placed on a swing. And then there are several Shivalingams that are installed, one of which is the Ashtotra Lingam, wherein you see those small projections on the main lingam. Each of it is a Shivalingam by itself. So that's like 108 Shivalingams that is enshrined. 107 of those small projections, and the main lingam is there. So that sums up to 108 Shivalingams. So just by worshipping in this one shrine, you get the punyam of worshipping 108 Shivalingams. The south entrance is where the Dvajastambham is kept, and this is like the main entry point into the temple. And as we all know, the south is generally, it houses the shrine of Dakshinamurti. So that's the shrine of Dakshinamurti. In a few temples, we see very specific importance given to the shrine of Dakshinamurti. And in fact, here in Kalahasti, there is also a bronze icon for Dakshinamurti, a processional Murti who's also installed and worshipped. And as for the reasons of this and what are these very special shrines and why are they special, I'm reserving that discussion now. But you can be informed that there are special reasons as to a few traditions that were followed, ancient traditions, which demanded exclusivity to Dakshinamurti shrines. As we enter, we cross Dakshinamurti shrine, you walk down the corridors. So this shrine, like the other Panchabhuta Sthalams, have also been in the later stages, especially in the last 100 years, been renovated by the Nagaratar community. What you see here in picture is from the later Nayak style mandapam, the Prakaram halls. There are also Pandya period inscriptions here. So a temple again, which is seen continuous patronage. The corridors very clearly resemble the ones that you see in Chidambaram, Ekamareshwara temple in Kanchi, and Trivaneka. So that seems more like a common grammar that the Nagaratars have used, architectural grammar, to when they came into expanding temples. This picture shows columns that are from the later Pandya period, so being patronized then also. The other shrines, that's the shrine for Ganapati and Subramanya. As it goes, there is absolutely no reference to anything to do with Ragu or Ketu through the Puranas here. None of these existing Puranas, even the most recent one authored a century back, has any reference to Ragu and Ketu worshipping here. The only reference to the snake is from the story of Kalan that we just discussed. Sahasralingam. There are several shrines for Ganapati. These are all from the walls of the external walls of the Garbhagraham, where you have Ganesha, Lingodbhava on the western wall, Bhairavamurti, Durga, Kannappar. These are from the external niches of the Sanctum Sanctorum. A very unique factor that that many of us miss when we go here is the Spatika Lingam. It is in the second corridor in the hallways. You might have to ask some priest there because he is installed as one among several other Shivalingams. So a very unique fact where, a very unique case where a Spatikam stone has been carved out as a Linga Banam that has been installed in a stone pedestal. There are other shrines, like for example, Mahavishnu there, Vallabha Ganapati, and a platform where all important devatas associated with the temple are installed. So you have Ganapati, who came here along with Shakti and also gave a darshan to Agastya. That's the spider, Shri, the snake, Kala. That's also the spider. Another snake, and it's Kannappan. As we approach, the next corridor is where the main Dvajastambham for Sri Kalahastishvara Swami's shrine is kept. A close-up look. And these are the deities invoked in the four directions that you see. So every Dvajastambham will have this part in the shape of a box where you will see different deities enshrined in there. They're all installed. They're not just mere decorative motifs. They're all installed through Vedic rites, agamic rituals. And so each Dvajastambham has separate prescriptions depending on the main deity installed as to who is this deity who gets installed in which direction. So typically in a Shiva temple, most commonly you see Ganesha, Shiva and Parvati on the Rishabha, and Subramanya on three sides. And on the side facing Parameshwara, you see Astradevar, the trident, the Trishula that Parameshwara holds. Finally, Swami Shrine, a very clear double lintel beam. You can see that's the roof. And given the height factor, they've gone in for another tie beam like structure that will take the load of the main prime. That's the Nandi right in front of Swami Shrine. A very old Nandi, the stone Nandi seems like maybe from the Chola period. And then there is another Nandi made out of Panchaloha that's also installed. That's the Vimanam of Parameshwara, the western side, in fact. the main hall, the main door in front of Parameshwara's shrine, Kalahastishwara shrine. That's Chanda and Munda, the Dwarapalakas for Parameshwara. That's a painting of Shri Silpi sir. It has a square pedestal, and that's the Utsava Murti. I mean, not technically the Utsava Murti, a small processional Murti of Parameshwara to which Abhishekams are performed. As I told you, the Mula Murti is devoid of any material that is used for Abhishekam. That's the golden casing that covers the Mula Lingam that's there. You can see the hood of the snake alone, which is a part of the Mula Lingam. And then you can see the spider there right at the bottom of the Lingam. Then you can see what looks like the tusk, which kind of grows to the complete length of the Mula Lingam. It's a square pedestal. That by itself, generally, as a thumb rule, when you see a square pedestal or what is called as Chaturapitam, you can ascertain the Murti to be a Swayambhu Murti. Now, that's not a photograph of the Mula Lingam. Apparently, there has been a documentary that was done, very similar to the one that was done by Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanam, where they have managed to erect a very stunningly similar set and requested the priest of the temple to perform all the rituals that can be documented. And for people who cannot participate in the actual rituals when it is performed in the sanctum sanctorum, can at least be informed about how things happen, how the rituals are performed. So a similar documentary has been done, and these are screenshots from that. So that's Bhoga Shakti, a bronze icon of Parvati, who's generally who's generally seated on a pedestal or in some cases standing, who gets to be installed in close proximity to the sanctum sanctorum. In most cases, it's right outside the main entrance to the sanctum sanctorum, or in some cases like this, she finds a place inside the Garbhagraham. And so she is called as Bhoga Shakti, the one who breathes in the Shakti inside the Mula Lingam. So it's like worshipping both of them together. That's another painting without the Kavacham. So you can see the spider there and the tusk of the elephant and the snake, the hood of the snake there. The Bhoga Shakti and that bronze icon of Parameshwara to which daily ablutions are performed. This should be a very modern day painting because the artist has conveniently introduced Raghu and Ketu, but the traditional artist like even Sri Silpi sir hasn't given any clue about the Raghu and Ketu connect with Kalahasti. More pictures from the same documentary. So the Vayulinga concept is brought by a particular lamp, which always, the flame from which always keeps waving. You have several lamps that are lit inside the Garbhagraham, as the tradition goes. While none of the other flames flicker, this particular lamp, the pair of flames that are there, lit there alone, always keeps waving and flickering. So that is a clue that Vayu Bhagavan is present somewhere there, and his presence is what is acknowledged by that continuous flickering of the flames that comes from that particular lamp. That's the Karpura Harati done. The official priests of the temple were also a part of the documentary where they have performed the Sankabhishekam. As the tradition goes, as always, every day, it's only water with special herbs like Pachakarpuram and others that are mixed for the ablution for the Mula Murti. It's only clean water that is used from the Swarnamukhi river that's used for the Abhishekam. But for that, there is no Abhishekam done with other materials like milk or other dairy products or honey and fruits. Nothing goes into the daily Abhishekam of Kalahastishwara Swami. So after visiting Kalahastishwara shrine, we come to Ambal shrine. This is the Vimanam on top of Jnana Prachunambikai. She is, here the name of the deity is Jnana Prachunambikai. And more interestingly, it's been borrowed from the Tevaram hymns where Appar Peruman refers to her as Jnana Pungodai. More about that when we see the Tevaram. That's again Silpi sir's rendition of the Garbhagraham there, artistic representation of the Garbhagraham there. There is a Mahameru that is installed here in the temple. That's worshipped too. So the reason for, the Puranic episode that involves Ambal here is about how once in Kailasha, Parameshwara was in tapas and Parvati was playing with Subramanya. And when Parameshwara was getting done with his tapas, she approached him. As he was playing with Skanda as a little kid, she asked him to lecture her upon about the meanings of Panchakshara Mantram. So Parameshwara told that, if you want to be a disciple and get the Panchakshara Mantram as Upadesam, probably you'll have to follow the traditions and you'll have to have your own vavs that you perform before being initiated into the Panchakshara, one of which is a vav of silence, a Maunavratam. So Parvati was asked to abstain from making any conversation to be to have her Maunavratam in place. But overwhelmed by the joy, overwhelmed and by the fact that Parameshwara has promised to tell her, initiate her into the Panchakshara Mantram, Parvati breaks her silence and tells this out to her close associates in the Kailasha. And so this, when Parameshwara came to know about this, he curses her to be born in the world, because this is what mortal beings do when they are given a secret. Not keeping it to yourself is a sin, in fact. So we have committed something like that. So you be born as one amongst them there, and you'll be born in Sri Kalahasti Kshetram, and there you continue your penance. I'll come there on the fixed date, and I'll be there when your tapas is over. I'll be there to bless you with the Panchakshara Mantram. So as the story goes in many other Shiva shrines, Parvati is born here in Sri Kalahasti, and she meditates upon Parameshwara for him to appear and to initiate her into the Panchakshara Mantram. So Shiva comes in here and gives her the Panchaksharam, which she again continues to chant and again continues her penance. And there are several tests that Shiva brings in there, and she wins in all of them, only to be blessed by the holy union with Parameshwara when her tapas was over. And the wedding ceremony is believed to have happened on coinciding with the Mahashivaratri day. So till date, the annual Utsavam happens with Mahashivaratri as the most important festival. So the 10-day festival spans with Mahashivaratri in between. So it was here in Kalahasti that Jnanam, or that very seasoned intelligence in a very spiritual way, spiritual intelligence for that matter, flowered in Ambal. So she is called as Jnana Prachunambikai or Jnana Pungodai in Tamil. This is the shrine of Chaturmukha Linga. You can recall the story of Brahma and how he came here in the immediately a little after the Srishti happened, and how he came here to worship, to meditate upon Parameshwara. And it is said that this lingam was installed by him. However, artistically speaking, this is a Chola period Chaturmukha lingam with 4 faces on the facing 4 different directions, and the 5th is what is here. So all the 5 phases makes up to the 5 phases of Shiva. Then you have on the rock front, the temple, the one wall, the one compound wall, one side of the compound wall, it just fits itself so close to the terrain, the hilly terrain. So you can actually see the rock faces there, which are carved with some beautiful scenes, especially those popular ones from Tarukavanam episode, where Parameshwara comes down as Bhikshatana. And so you have the Rishipatnis who follow him. And later you have the rishis who are also mesmerized by the beauty of Mohini. And finally, they understand that it's some black magic that is trying to attack them, disturb their tapas there. And so they perform a yajnam and try to kill Shiva, not knowing that it is Shiva. So they aim several weapons that comes out from the Yaga Kundam on Shiva. And we know how Gajasamhara Murti comes out from there. And finally, Shiva performs his Ananda Tandavam and bless the rishis of Tarukavanam. And there is another panel. All these are from the Vijayanagara period. You can see another very detailed panel of Parameshwara and Parvati getting married, Mahavishnu giving his sister in marriage, Brahma performing all the wedding rites, Ganesha and Subramanya. Vijayanagara period sculptures that have been bas-relief murtis that have been painted recently. You can see the face of the rock on which these sculptures find place. The bronzes in the temple, I should make a reference very specific to the Nayanmar bronzes. In fact, all 63 of them, very later period. They've been casted in a very late period and installed. But what is special about them is they're all shown holding objects with which they can be identified easily. For example, Kalaya Nayanar holds a small sickle in his hand. The Thillaivaazhu Andanargal hold a nice Kamandalam and a Homadandam in their hand. And so the objects which they hold is very creative, and it kind of associates them. It is easy to associate them with the story. That's a nice depiction that you see here. And Nataraja is from a 12th century, very classic Chola period production. Nataraja and Shivakama Sundari. And not to be missed bronze, in fact. Yeah, the Nayanmar panel, the gallery of Nayanmars. And there are several bronze icons, each describing an episode from the Puranas that are associated with this place. Now, this is Krishna and the Pandavas. So you have Arjuna, Draupadi, and others. So that's like the Panchapandavas who visited Kalahasti during their exile. Venugopala, Krishna is Venugopala. And there is a very beautiful representation of the spider, the elephant, Agastya, and the snake, which is also worshipped in the temple. Yeah, that's the complete arrangement of all the important bronzes. Starting from left, that's Subramanya on a Mayuram. That's Kannappar. And here in this desk here, you find this the spider, Agastya with the snake and the elephant. That's Kalahastishvara as Somaskandamurti, Ganesha, Jnana Prashunambikai, Chandikeshwara, Shiva and Parvati as Tripurantaka and Tripura Sundari, Chandrasekhara. When we generally speak about Chola bronzes, we restrict ourselves to Tamil Nadu, but Kalahasti is a must. We want to appreciate some very beautiful Chola period murtis that are installed in worship. Kannappan, that most revered and a very, very special, exclusive devotee of Shiva, born in a tribal clan, not knowing anything about Shiva, not knowing anything about worship, rituals, offerings, nothing. He goes on his first adventure into the forest, accompanied by a few friends. And so he manages to hunt a wild boar, and he loses track, he loses his friends, and somehow he reaches an unknown zone inside the forest, a part of the forest. And somehow later he joined two of his friends who say it's already time, we'll have to find our way and go out. But Kannappan denies, because there he sees a small a rock, in fact, that's being worshipped, a very, very rudimentary form of Shivalingam worship, probably, because chronologically speaking, Kannappar is generally placed between the 4th and the 5th century. That's like a couple of centuries even before the Tevaram Trio. So 4th or the 5th century. And so Kannappar period, it should be in that time when Shivalingam worship was just getting very popular, and worshipping Lingamurtis in almost all possible rock phases should have been brought into practice. So here we see how Kannappar finds this one Lingamurti inside the forest, to which somebody has offered a puja. And so he's just curious to see the way the rituals are done with flowers and food offerings and other things. And by the mere sight of the Lingamurti there, he submits himself, falls in love for the deity. And we all know how he managed to do his own way of his own way of puja, which involved, he manages to gurgle some water, hold some water in his mouth from the Swarnamukhi river, manages to pluck all these wild flowers. And when he found out that food offering is a part of the puja, all that he had was cooked pork, which he didn't mind offering to Shiva. So he brings that, offers it to Shiva, and manages to give him a bath with the water that he was holding in his throat and the flowers that he is plucked from the forest. So this is the kind of puja that he was doing. The next day morning, when the priest who was worshipping Shiva there came, he was taken back to see meat scattered around the murti, and someone has actually come in there and performed a puja. So he cleans the place and does his own way of regular puja with flowers and cooked food for offering. So this goes on, and one fine day, the priest is worried, requests Parameshwara, asks him what is the sin that he has done, that every day his puja is being made impure like meat pieces and other things being strewn around the Murti. So Parameshwara tells him to hide behind a tree the next day morning and see what is happening. And to the surprise of the priest, after his pujas were over, he hides behind a tree, only to see Kannapar walk in, and he performs his own puja by spitting the water from his mouth as an abhishekam, offering the cooked meat, and so that's his way of worshipping. And the priest is again taken back, but he cannot understand how come Shiva accepts all this meat, for example, as an offering. And then Shiva tells him the next night that that's the kind of love that he's got for me. You started worshipping me after you came to know about me, after you got to know the agamas and the shastras and the boons that you can probably get from me. He has no clue about what am I, who am I, and how am I to be worshipped. But his love is just overwhelming, and that's the reason why I just accept anything that he offers. And the next day, to again prove to the world the unparalleled love that Kannappa had, Shiva, when Kannappa has come there to perform his daily rituals, one eye of the Shivalingam starts bleeding, and without a second thought, Kannappa manages to pluck his eye. He scoops his eye off with an arrow that from his quiver and applies it on the Lingamurti. And immediately, to test him further, it is said that the next eye also starts bleeding. And when Kannappa didn't know how to stop it, again without a second thought, he just lifted his leg, placed it there, because the moment he's going to pluck his second eye, he won't have a clue as to where exactly the eye of Shiva is, which is bleeding, so that he can place the eye that he's just scooped off from his face. So to mark that place, he rests his foot with his footwear on. He rests that on the face of Shivalingam, and just a second before he started plucking his other eye, Shiva stopped him and proved his love, brought it out to the whole world. So the love of Kannapar is what is being celebrated by the Devaram authors, later by Manikavachakar and more. So a devotee who is just unparalleled, and an example of how very pure love and devotion can veto when it comes to following traditions and rituals in the most strict fashion possible. Veto's dominance when it comes to an argument between how strict you follow the standard text, or is it the love that's very pure and that is just overflowing when it comes to exposing your bhakti, exhibiting your bhakti. Kannapar becomes an important subject to be explored in all forms of art, especially in many Shiva temples. Starting from the 11th century, you see Kannapar is installed in one of the entrances of the shrine to Shiva. So he finds a place there only to remind every person entering the Shiva temple to be reminded of that love that Kannapar had and the way Parameshwara blessed him. So he's of course one of the 63 Nayanmars, and in several temples you see bronze icons. My most favorite is the one that you see here, housed in the bronze gallery at Tanjavur Museum, and a stone icon of Kannapar in Sri Kalahasti. There is a temple dedicated to Kannappa and the Shivalingam that he worshipped, which is there on the hillock, which is just next to the temple, and it is said, your visit to Kalahasti is incomplete without making a visit to Kannappa's shrine. That's with the temple. And I'm just picking 3 Tevaram verses which speaks about the greatness of Sri Kalahasti. First, to begin with, Thirukadaikappu from Gnanasambandar. Veyanaya Tolumayor, Bagamadu Vagavidai, Yeri Shadaimel, Tuyamadi Sudi, Sudugadinidam Adi, Malai Thannai Vinavil, Vai Kalasamaga Vadivadu Seyyum, Vedan, Malaraga Nayanam, Kai Kanayinal Idanda, Ishanadi Kud, Kalatti Malage. Very beautiful rhythm, in fact, Gnanasambandar has used to compose a set of songs for Sri Kalahasti. And this particular song is important because he gives he describes that love of Kannapar in the second half of the poem. Vai Kalasamaga Vadivadu Seyyum Vedan. We generally offer an abhishekam by carrying water in a kalasam. That's a sacrificial part in which sacred water is stored, and you perfume it with scents and other special objects before using it for an abhishekam. Here, Kannapar also had a kalasam, but just that it was his mouth in which he managed to have some water and use that for his abhishekam. And Parameshwara very mercifully took it on him as the best abhishekam that he can get and blessed. So Gnanasambandar's Tevaram, which speaks about this episode. Next is that of Upper தேனப்பூ வண்டுண்டு கொன்றையான் கான் திரு ஏகம்பத்தான் கான் தேனார்ந்துக்கு ஞான பூங்கோதையாள் பாகத்தான் கான் நம்பன்கான் ஞான தொழியானான் கான் வானப்பேரூரு மரியா ஓடி மட்டித்து நின்றான் கான் வண்டார் சோலை கானப்பேரூரான் கான் கரைகண்டன் கான் காலத்தியான் அவன் என் கண்ணுளானே. The Tevaram, this particular Tevaram, authored by Appar, dedicated to Kalahastishwara, it speaks about, it's more like introducing us to Kalahastishwara and detail out all that specialities of his. He's like, have a look at this Kalahasti Appan of mine, who is, and again, the next song goes on to list out all the great deeds of Shiva. So here is the reference to Jnana Pungodai, the deity here, in whom the Shiva Jnanam flowered. Jnana Pungodai. As I told you how Parvati was initiated into the Panchakshara Mantram here in Kalahasti, chanting which got her Shiva Jnanam. So the place where Shiva Jnanam flowered in Uma Parvati is the where she is called as Jnana Pungodai. And so here the first reference comes from Appar's Tevaram, and later on in the Purana she is called as Jnana Prashunambikai. Manikavachagar and his reference to it also. Sundaramurti Nayanar's reference to Kalahasti. Now, recording the praise in stone, we just saw about Pasurams, now about inscriptions that you see here. So all three of the Tevaram authors have visited Kalahasti and have sung about it. There are many inscriptions. In fact, this is a very beautiful example to understand the way inscriptions are structured and how the content of an inscription, the style in which inscriptions have been authored in different periods. So, there are a handful of temples that I would generally suggest for a person who would like to know about how inscriptions have evolved over different periods. Kalahasti is one such. So this is being patronized by almost all the ruling dynasties, starting from the Pallavas, Cholas, and Pandyas, and it's been called as Mummudi Cholapuram. And the deity this is from Kulothunga's period. It's referred to as Mummudi Cholapuram, and the deity here is referred to as Chola Vidangar. And there are the inscriptions from Krishnadevaraya's period, which speaks about a 10-day festival and how the 8th day there were special endowments created to offer dosai. For some reason, dosai finds a special reference in most of the inscription here. Out of all the food preparations, a general notion is the prasadams are more popular in Vishnu temples. That's not the case. The inscriptions prove otherwise. In fact, a wide variety of prasadams is what you get from Shiva temples. And more importantly, each temple has got its own special prasadam too. For whatever reasons, a lot of people seem to be fascinated by prasadams in Vishnu temples. But this is another unexplored area in Shiva temples. Several temples have their own special prasadam, a recipe that is handled and that is being used for quite a few generations now. So one such is the Dosai Prasadam that finds references time and again, starting from Chola period up until even the Vijayanagara period here in Sri Kalahasti. Another inscription from Kulothunga III, it speaks about a land donation and repair works done. Another common misconception is about there is no traditional records on conservation that were done here. Or some people even go ahead and say there is absolutely no concept of conservation that was existing here. It cannot be the case at all. With several thousand temples being built by various patrons, we should have had conservation policies and text which speaks about conservation. And for a matter of fact, we do have those books still in use, just that they are not popular. And maybe sometime soon I'll also make a presentation on traditional conservation practices which are still in place. And coming back to this, the 8th Ignalier inscription of Veerarajendra Chola, it speaks about a particular official named as Tirukkalatti Deva Yadavarayan. So every representative from the king who are employed in a temple will be given titles. That's more like a description or the designation title, which is exclusive to that particular temple. So here he is called as Tirukkalatti Deva Yadavarayan. After him, maybe yet another Tirukkalatti Deva Yadavarayan will come in, but that's more like a title given to him. And it speaks about how this particular official started a new festival in the month of Vaikasi. The deity is referred to as Tirukkalatti Udaya Nayanar, Tirukailayamudayar. As it goes, it's Dakshina Kailasam, and Vidangar, Sodhi Vidangar, several names in different inscriptions. The Yadava king called as Narasingha Kalatti Devan has donated the village Vendanallur, probably the Vendanallur near today's Viluppuram, was given tax-free to celebrate the Vaikasi festival, which was started in the Chola period. Several mutts have existed here in place. That by itself is a clue as to how populated the city of Kalahasti was. And each of the mutt was patronized by a different sect of Shaivism. And so the mutt, every mutt will have its own Guru Paramparai. There will be a sitting pontiff who administers the mutt. And in most cases, the mutts will have a direct connect with the temple, sometimes administrative control, sometimes playing a role in the administrative board, or sometimes just creating an endowment to celebrate a few specific festivals or services in the temple. However, the mutts were the venues that connected the temple and the pilgrims who've come to the particular place, and that the existence of these mutts ensured that the religion and the traditions were upheld. In fact, we are all talking a lot about saving temples and other things. What we've forgotten and we have lost in the last 100 years is the tradition of several hundreds of mutts. It was a very casual and a common tradition in almost all Hindu families to have an association with some mutt. Without any, no difference in community or caste, every community, every family will have a mutt to which they are associated. And it is extremely unfortunate that several hundred mutts that find references even in the colonial records have simply disappeared today, and most of the properties and the mutts and other things, we are not sure as to what happened to them. Today, it has all shrunk to maybe a dozen mutts that are popular here in Tamil Nadu, but even till 17th and 18th century or late 18th century also, we find references in colonial records about hundreds of mutts in major temple towns like Kanchipuram and Chidambaram and Sri Kalahasti as an example here. One of this mutt was called as Tyagamekan Madam, and another was called as Kutrudaita Sami Tevar Madam. A beautiful name. Kutrudaita Sami is Parameshwara as Kala Samhara. Kutru is Yama. So Kala Samharam is referred to here. And so Kutrudaita Sami Tevar Madam and more. So each community will generally be affiliated to a Madam, and the Madam will have a head office somewhere and several branch offices or branch mutts in all these sacred towns to which people made pilgrimage. There were gardens, and one particular garden was named after Kannappar. That's like the most apt name to be given to a garden existing in Sri Kalahasti. Another garden named after Alala Sundaran was there. And there is an inscription from Kulothunga III's period, which speaks about acknowledgement receipts given to wife of Tandira Balan when she gifted 96 sheep to burn a perpetual lamp. Now, most of these inscriptions that speaks about donating cattle to the temple to create an endowment for a perpetual lamp can all be considered as acknowledgement receipts. So it's also a record partly. So it will have verses which acknowledges the donation from a person who's the wife of or son of so and so from this particular village, and in some cases even the gotram or their the subsect and all that will also be mentioned. A very clean and unambiguous record it becomes, and a receipt is also a part of these records. On the 14th century inscription, which speaks about a Vallarasan who hunted wild beasts in the forest around this place and how he safeguarded the civilians. So this Vallarasan is identified by a few historians as a person belonging to the community of Kannappar, the tribal hunter community of Kannappar. And another detailed inscription of Kannappar's life history is seen there from the Chola period. Now, as far as the Nayanmar life history is concerned, it's documented history. Maybe Periyapuranam, which was authored roughly 800-900 years back, is like the best documentation, which has been done after extensive study and research by Sekidar. Unfortunately, over later period, in the 16th and 17th century, we started, there were other ways of propagating these sacred stories of these devotees. So wherein, the dilution had happened. So modern additions have been brought in, social conditions have been brought in, and so there are a lot of dilutions in these stories. The most authentic one is the best way to understand the Nayanmars without any ambiguity is to read Sekidar's Periyapuranam. There are some very good authorized English translations for people who cannot understand the Tamil from 12th century. The next immediately, probably the inscriptions only to be restricted to the Chola period, which speaks about the life history of Nayanmars, can be taken as authentic sources for the story. So there is one particular from the Chola period right there in the hill temple, which details out the story of Kannappar. Then you have Rajaraja Chola's inscription, which speaks about a crown that he gave with several precious diamonds installed in it. And Mummudi Cholapuram, as it was called during the later Chola period, and the 16th century inscription which speaks about the Rajagopuram, the Western Rajagopuram as we call it today, that was built by Krishnadevaraya. The last segment on festivals. So Kalahasti has several festivals and they are celebrated in a very, very grand fashion. The temple is patronized really well till date, and there are enough resources to celebrate these festivals as grand as possible. Every night you have the Ekanta Sevai, which is very grandly celebrated every day. It's a show to it's a ritual not to miss. You should participate. Unfortunately, for most of the pilgrims who go from Chennai, given the proximity, we start early in the morning, go there, and we're back to Chennai either in the evening or early evening. But these sacred towns especially demand that you stay there at least a couple of nights to participate in at least the daily rituals, if not the special and the annual ones, at least the daily rituals to understand and appreciate it better. So if you get a chance to stay there, don't miss the Ekanta Sevai. It is done in a very, very grand fashion. So the Brahmotsavam, or the annual festival that is conducted in the month of mid-February to mid-March, coinciding with the Shivaratri, starts from a Dvajarohanam in the temple uphill. That's where the shrine for Kannappar is kept. So that's the bronze icon of Kannappar that's worshipped. So he is brought down from the temple. He is like an important devotee. So in most of the ancient towns, you have the tradition of how the devotees are celebrated preceding the main festival. So the starting days, you'll have exclusive festivals where the devotee is worshipped and taken out in a procession, and it is to be considered that it is the devotee, this particular Nayanmar, who is conducting the festival as such. So his blessings are invoked first, and you see actually a flag hoisting that is done in the temple uphill, followed by a very, very grand flag hoisting ceremony in the main temple campus. You see this unique way of the Dvajam, the Rishabha Dvajam, decorated with saris. There are several villages which are populated by traditional weaving community in and around Kalahasti. Kalamkari and all that is also close by. So, there are several villages where you see the traditional weaving community. Some of them are even Tamil speaking, and a few of them have shifted to Telugu in the recent past. But ancient and native communities of weavers. So, as a mark of respect to the main temple that is there, they weave new saris and offer it on the day of Dvajarohanam. So all of that goes into an actual decoration around the Dvajastambam. The deity, starting from the Dvajarohanam day, the flag hoisting day, comes out on a procession, on a very grand procession in different vahanas around the 4 streets, around the temple. This is Jnana Prashunambike on Hamsa, Kailasha Parvatam. Seshavahanam, Rishabhavahanam. On the Shivaratri night, it's the Rishabhavahanam, on which a very grand celebration, on which a procession where Kalahastishvara is brought out. Rathotsavam, Gajavahanam, Jnana Prashunambika on the Simhavahanam. And on the last day, the concluding day, the Mahakalyanootsavam happens. So the Purana speaks about how Parvati came here to be initiated into the Panchaksharam. Then she continued her penance, and on the day that was fixed by Parameshwara, he appeared here, gave her a darshan, and got married to her. A very grand wedding attended by the celestials. So that's conducted till date. And as the tradition goes, the bride and the groom are made to sit facing each other. Shiva on the Airavatam, the elephant, and Parvati on the Simhavahanam. And you see the priest who exchange garlands, and finally the Mangala Sutram is tied around the neck of Jnana Prashunambika. The last day, Tirthavari happens, and that's a very classic example for a Chola period Astra Devar. And that's basically the Deva, the divine weapon, Trishulam, which has Parameshwara and Parvati as Chandrasekhara. in the Swarnamukhi river. The Tirthavari happens in the Swarnamukhi river. Another very classic Chola period Murti of Subramanya as Shanmukha. And he is sitting on a peacock with Valli and Devasena. The Teppotsavam. This is how Ugadi, the New Year day, is celebrated. It's a very detailed Asthana Pitam. It starts from there. It has a Kurmasanam, or the turtle on which the asanam is all built. So the lowest tier is held by the 8 elephants, each facing one direction, and the Ashtanagams and other Digbalakas. And the next level, you have other Devatas, Rishis, Gandharvas, all of them praying. So all of them are a part of the pedestal on which Parameshwara sits. So the Ugadi Asthanam is another special occasion. The Navaratri is also celebrated in a very grand fashion. Jnana Prachunambikai is decorated as performing meditation, and on the subsequent days, the Alankaram depicts her slaying each of the demons as described in Devi Bhagavatam. So every night, as the Navaratri goes on, there is a fight that Parvati, she kills a particular demon. And so that is depicted every day in the Alankaram done. Jewels, that's a modern offering, in fact. That's the gold casing. You can see those 9 flat plates on which you have 27 flowers. All 27 basically represent the gemstones that the snake offered. So that's depicted as flowers, but it's the very pure gemstones that were offered. And so this is what is used to cover the Moola Murti. That's the holy feet of Jnana Prachunambikai. These are all modern offerings. A robe made out of gold, in fact, for Ambal, a Swarna Kavacham. And that's for Ambal again. A crown with diamonds, or Jadai, and Karnavatram. Some vintage pictures. You can see the bridge, the Swarnamukhi river, picture probably taken from the Kannapar temple uphill. So that concludes Sri Kalahasti and Dakshina Kailasam, as the tradition goes. And of course, Muthuswami Dikshitar has also referred to it as Dakshina Kailasam, and how the story of Kannapar, that's like the essence. So in all his Panchabhuta Kritis, he's managed to bring in the essence of the Kshetram, covering as much information as possible. And so here it's the story of that Kiratan, that the hunter, which Dikshitar finds very important to be recorded. So this place, which was worshipped by Brahma, followed by Vayu, the place where Vayu was given the role of performing the role of the wind, and he's titled as the wind god. It happened here. So the lingam that he's worshipped as Vayu Lingam, and how the spider, snake, and an elephant, all three worshipped Shivalingam, the Vayu Lingam here, and attained Moksham. The place that later developed with Jnana Prachunambikai and the Tevaram people coming in and being patronized, starting at least from the late Pallava period and the early Chola, and the tradition kind of continued. Krishnadevaraya's time, of course, with its proximity to Chandragiri and Tirumala, it was an obvious choice for Krishnadevaraya to bestow with a lot of jewelry, to offer a lot of jewelry and land, and to sustain the temple. And the tradition has continued till date. A must-visit temple, and a temple that you should probably stay, especially Chennaiites. Just because it is close to Chennai, please don't come back in like half a day's time and all. Don't go on a flying visit, and don't go there just for performing your Rahu Ketu Pariharams. To begin with, it's a Shiva Kshetram. It's a place that has been sanctified by the verses of Nayanmars, and above all, it's the place where Kannapar, the man with unparalleled love to Shiva, was brought, the greatness of this particular devotee was brought out to the world. So please go there, stay at least for a day, visit all these places, and the Agastishwara shrine that I told you, which is very close to the temple, and spend some time with Kannapar and spend your time with Kalahastishwarar and Jnana Prasunambikai, and all your worries probably that you think is caused by Rahu and Ketu will be taken care of for sure. That concludes my presentation for today. The next week will be the last episode of this series, where we'll be seeing Chidambaram, Tillai, Perampatra Puliyur, called by several names, a favorite shrine for all Shiva devotees, the most important of the shrines, what can be rightfully called as the capital for the Shaivites, the temple which has a Garbhagraham which is very unique, the Chitsabai, the temple which has the Panchasabais in fact, and a temple with stories for every stone that is there, literally. The Sabai where Nataraja performs his cosmic dance, to be witnessed by Shivakama Sundari, and the festivals that are there across the year. Most importantly, the Chidambara Rahasyam. All of this will be covered in the next week's episode. And I would like to inform that maybe next week's session might get a little longer, given the fact that it is Chidambaram. So please be prepared for it. Maybe 30 or 40 minutes more than our usual 60-minute slot we will need for Chidambaram. So please come prepared for that. With that, I conclude this week's presentation. Shri Tyagaraja Maharajo Vijayate Arura Tyagesa. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Thank you. I'm going for the questions now. A question from Ms. Naintara Chakravarti. Isn't Vishnu the creator of Brahma? Brahma rises from Vishnu's navel. See, the tradition is the Shaivites and the Vaishnavites vary in this aspect, because these are not, these are from Purana, so everybody has their own version. This Vishnu that you identify here as the father of Brahma is by himself, he himself is believed to be created by Sadashiva. And, Sadashiva manifests as Brahma. Shiva. A question from Mr. Pranav Raj. Any connection between Swarnamukhi stone in Panchayatana Puja and Swarnamukhi river? Yes, the Swarnamukhi that is used in the Panchayatana Puja, which represents Ambal, is from Kalahasti. Is it Ardhameru or Mahameru? It is a Mahameru, a very uniquely done one. It looks like an Ardhameru because there are a lot of flowers and other things kept on top of it. A question from Ms. Parvati Ravikumar. Which part of the existing temple is Chola structure? The core part, especially the Sanctum Sanctorum, is from later Chola period. And you see a few mandapams which are also from later Chola period. One from Mr. Ramasubramaniam. Yes. If time permits, once again, you can explain about Rahu Ketu connection to the temple. Yeah, as I told you, there is absolutely no connection to Rahu and Ketu given in any of the Puranas authored. There are close to 4 or 5 different Puranas that speaks the greatness of Kalahasti temple. That seems more like a modern addition. Pranav Raj, is there a Girivalam practice here? Yes, Swami and Ambal also perform Girivalam here. Another question from Parvati Ravikumar. The white Tumbai flower is considered very special here for worship. What is the significance? Tumbai flower is, it is believed to be one of those flowers that Kannapar used to worship, because it's a wild flower, and so it's available easily. It just grows everywhere. So Kannapar managed to get those flowers to offer to Parameshwara. And another question from Arvapalli Srini. Any Puranic story of Swarnamukhi river in Sri Kalahasti? Yes. It is said that Swarnamukhi is from the Ganga. It's like a stream of the holy Ganga that was brought in here by Agastya. And so, there are several Puranas associated. So one which speaks about the origin of Swarnamukhi. One version of it says that it was Agastya who, with the blessings of, with the support from Ganesha, managed to get a stream of Ganga to flow here as Swarnamukhi. Mr. Gokul Raj, sir, can you please let us know about the special pujas for deities in this temple? The special pujas, as in, I'm not getting to the Rahu Ketu Pariharam, but for that, like any other Shiva temple, everyday rituals and all that is performed. The 6 Kala pujas are performed, and you have the usual monthly pujas also. The Brahmotsavam is very special because it's from, it is from the Puranas that it continues. So you have the tradition of how Shivaratri becomes the most important celebration that is done here. And so the Brahmotsavam is planned in a way that Shivaratri becomes the 5th day of the 10-day festival. And it is very beautifully crafted here that every evening procession in the Brahmotsavam. It's planned in a way that it is attended by a particular, a specific group of devotees. Like, for example, the first night is the first night of the first day festival is referred to as Devaratri. Then you have Rishiratri. Then there are also other Brahmaratri. So it goes on. And the night of Shivaratri is called as Anandaratri. So every night is special here. Probably if there is anything very unique that is celebrated, it's this part. Yeah, one question from Mr. Ganesh E. Could you please tell us why Tirtham being given and not Tiruneer? Yes, here because the Abhishekam that is done to the Moolamurti is important. Any Vibhuti Prasadam that is given to you is what has been used for Abhishekam in any of the Shiva temple. Yeah, I mean, the Prasadam that is given is what was used for Abhishekam. But here, since there is no Vibhuti Abhisheka Prasadam, and it is only the Pachakarpura Tirtham that goes in for Abhishekam of Kalahastishwara, it's just the Tirtham that is given. A question from Mr. V. Ram. What is the language of the inscription of this temple? Is it Tamil? Then it is an exception. Then is it an exception? It is in Tamil, majority of it. Of course, the inscriptions of Cholas also have usage of Grantha script also, but which will be Sanskrit words that is written in Grantha script. But predominantly, it's all in Tamil. But it is no exception per se. You see Tamil inscriptions in almost all the states of South India, Telangana, Andhra, Karnataka, and Kerala. So if in Tirumala, if you can just go back to my presentation on the inscriptions of Tirumala, statistically speaking, close to 97% of inscriptions are in Tamil. So the area, I mean, these were all ruled, it was all under the rule of the Cholas, and even during the times of Vijayanagara kings, the Rayas also, then again, Tamil was a part of the official language, and several inscriptions are in Tamil only, majority of them in fact. So it's nothing like a special feature or an exception. And another question from Syog Dhaidini. Like in the case of Arunachala and Kailasha, why is the practice of circumambulation not present here, especially since the hill is a part of the Kailasha itself? Now, the tradition of going around a hill is a practice in many temples here in South India. Some are like, modern, introductions that were done in the last couple of decades. Some, again, it has been traditional, like, for example, the Parvatamalai near Tiruvannamalai and other things. Here also, there are devotees who go around the hill. And Swami and Ambad also perform the circumambulation, but it is more like the uniqueness of Kailasha and Tiruvannamalai is the hill as such is considered to be Parameshwara. Here, this is only a part of the hill. So, that way it is, though it is to be respected and revered as much as Kailasha, it is not Kailasha as such. So Kailasha is just one, and it is the only one worthy to be considered as Shiva himself. Now, we also have traditions like going around the Govardhana. You have the Govardhan Parikrama, where again it's a hill and people go around it. But what makes Tiruvannamalai and Kailasha unique is that the hill is considered as Parameshwara himself. Unlike the Govardhanam, where Govardhanam is not Krishna. The special feature is that Krishna directed the Gopas to worship Govardhana. That's the reason why it is very special, and circumambulation or the Parikrama happens. Here again, there is nobody who stops you from doing it. And so the circumambulation actually goes on here also. One from Dr. Srivats Anant. Excellent, insightful information. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. Another question from Mr. Arunachala. Is the lingam that Kannappa Nayanar worshipped still seen today inside the shrine of Bhakta Kannappa? Can you see the two eyes on the lingam? No, the eyes part of it and other things are not visible, but the Shivalingam that he worshipped is there. But again, there are difference of opinions. For a devotee, yes, we think that this is the exact lingam that was touched and worshipped by Kannappa. But artistically speaking, it would have been replaced in the later time for whatever reasons. But for a devotee, it's more the sthalam that is important. So, feeling offended when, scholars assign a particular date to a murti, I don't think it is required. However old or new, a murti is still a murti, and it is sanctified by the hymns there, which are sung there, and the sthalam is all the same. And probably, for all you know, it is the same pedestal stone on which the Nayanmars stood when they composed their Tevarams or rendered their Tevarams, and it has stood there from all the times. And all that is more than enough. The aura there is more than enough to make the place special, irrespective of the fact how modern or old the murti is. So, for a devout person, it's without a question that we worship. Another question from Ms. Malati Sampath Kumar. Why is this temple not closed during the lunar and solar eclipses? I read it so. It's not just Kalahasti. There are several shrines that are not closed during the eclipses. In fact, again, it's a misconception that an eclipse is a period where you should close the temples, and people close their puja rooms in their houses and don't perform any puja, or consider that to be a period of impurity. That's not the case. In fact, the scriptures, several of the Matadhipatis and Pidadhipatis, they have all prescribed the Grahana Kalam, both Surya and Chandra Grahana Kalam, to be the most powerful and the most auspicious time to perform your japam and puja and other things. So in several temples, like for example, Tyagaraja Swami temple in Tiruvaru, it's a huge celebration during the Grahana Kalam. Whenever it is, even if it is like midnight or early hours or mid-noon, whenever it is happening, when the Grahana Kalam is actually happening, a Mahabhishekam is performed to Tyagaraja Swami. So similarly, here also, grand Abhishekam and other celebrations are done. So it is not a necessity to close temples or restrain from doing japam or pujais, or perform your own regular puja and other things in the Grahana Kalam. So, it can just, people can, if you've stopped it, you can continue it from the next Grahanam probably. Nothing stops you. Just that after your Grahanam gets over, you'll have to, do your ablutions and then come and also perform an Abhishekam to your Murtis at home, or you can continue with your Japam and other things. But it is no mandate that you will have to restrain from religious activities during the Grahana Kala. Someone has asked a question about Ardhameru and Mahameru. A Mahameru is completely pyramidal. I'm not getting into all the details. The shape and the volume of it is where the difference comes. As the name goes, Ardhameru is half of a Mahameru. So the first few prakarams that you see, the few avaranams that you see in a Meru alone is a part of the Ardhameru. So it's technically, removing a part of the Mahameru and worshipping the remaining parts alone. And there are more to it, but I'm just giving you a very, very brief meaning of it. I think that sums up. That's all. Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot once again. And please do join us next week at 6 p.m. And I'll share whatever little knowledge I have got on Chidambaram, the most important shrines of all. Shri Tyagaraja Maharaju Vijayate, Arura Tyagesa. Namaskaram.